There are moments that don't announce themselves. They just arrive, quietly, like dawn, sneaking up on a tired soul. I remember standing there, early morning alone, but somehow more alive than I had ever felt in years. Looking out at the rails stretching into the city, I saw a train appearing in the distance, its headlights soft in the morning haze, and it hit me. Right there on that platform, I'd never had to go back to the man I used to be. God wasn't calling me to run from my past. He was calling me to step forward, to step into something new, something redeemed. For the first time, I could see a different future, not chained to what I was, but free to who I was becoming. And the train pulled in and the doors opened to an empty car. And I realized the gospel wasn't just a story, it was an invitation. Grace doesn't just forgive, it transforms. I stepped off that train in Chicago, and the thought hit me so hard it nearly buckled my knees. I never have to go back to that old life again. I never had to go back. That thought didn't change my life overnight, but it changed the direction forever. Up to that point, my life had been a cycle of trying and failing and promising. And what I didn't understand yet was why this time was different. That's what I want to talk to you about today. So, my first memories are of a drunken father mistreating his family, leaving us when I was just a little boy. My mom telling me how I was going to be just like him, and how I had purposed in my heart that I wasn't going to be anything like him. And yet, at 15, here I was, leaving my own family, running off to be with this exact man that I said I didn't want to have anything to do with. And then going off and living a life in the carnival and learning how to drink and to party and not having any kind of attachments, and getting married and having my wife leave me and turning to alcohol and becoming a drunk. And I realized here I am. I was so determined I was going to be something different, and I'm stuck in the very exact traps that he was stuck in. It was quite frustrating. And I had tried. I would remove myself from my locations and go somewhere else, and try to hang out with different people. And I would have moments where I would do good, and then moments where I wasn't doing good at all. And it just began to become frustrating for me, to the point where it wasn't that I didn't want to change. I was just so tired. I didn't have any strength left to change. But all those moments of my life led me right there to that train platform in Chicago. And looking back now, I can see why that moment there on that platform was so transformative. Now, this concept didn't come out of the blue. I knew the verse. If any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away, and behold, all things have become new. It wasn't until I was reading and studying in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 10 seemed to jump off the page at me. He says, "Therefore, brethren, be all the more diligent to make your call and choosing sure. For if you do these things, you shall never fall." I couldn't believe what I had just read. It had been there the whole time, but somehow it meant something. It meant I never have to go back to that old lifestyle ever again. I mean, yeah, I had done good. I'd been a year clean, and up to that point, it was like this was just a good period in my life. But it was like I was running around with this pause play button on me. I was on pause right now, but eventually I was going to mess around, and I was going to hit play, and I was going to go back to drinking and doing all these other things that were making me absolutely miserable. But it was like all of a sudden, standing there on that platform, somebody removed all the buttons. I don't have to go back ever again. That thought shook me, because what I finally realized is I had a new future. I didn't know what that future was. I only knew what my past was. And here I have a verse that's telling me I never have to go back that way ever again. The funny thing is, standing there, and that thought didn't feel like motivation to try harder. It felt more like a promise that had just set me free. At this point, I'd probably been in Chicago a year. So I was clean. The Lord was calling me to go to Bible college. I didn't know what the future held, but this is what I did know. I didn't just lack the strength to quit. I lacked the strength to even try. Underneath that wasn't rebellion, it was shame. I felt unworthy of God. I felt used up. I felt helpless. All that had brought me to that point where there was nothing left of me to give. There was no self-effort. There was no pull myself up by my bootstraps. There was a complete and utter helplessness and surrender to God. And I had basically said, God, if you don't do something, I don't know what's going to happen. And he did. He brought me to the Pacific Garden Mission. He took me through that year-long program again. I soaked up the same information that they had been teaching the first 2 times I had been there. But as I said, now it was getting from my head to my heart. And something was changing. And being as it was getting into my heart, I began to realize something. Shame wasn't helping me. Shame was actually pushing me away from God. Shame causes us to hide from God, our only source of help. It's not until we begin to realize that he's not waiting for us to clean ourselves up and then come to him, but that he wants us to come to him just as we are, so that he can begin to clean us up, so that he can begin to transform our lives. And the way it sometimes goes, it's almost like a dam breaks. Once you begin to get a crack and the grace of God begins to flow through, it begins to flow through in other areas, and more scriptures began to come alive. Romans 5:6 says that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He wasn't asking me to fix myself or to begin to get better. Matter of fact, that verse says that he saw me in the worst position I had ever been in, and he looked down and he loved me, and he said, yep, I'll take that one. So when I had that thought that I never have to go back to that life again, it wasn't because somehow I had begun to believe in myself, in my ability. What it actually was is I finally began to believe that God loved me and was on my side. He wasn't ashamed of me. He loved me, even me. Right after that moment, nothing dramatic happened. I wasn't changed to perfection instantly, but for the first time, I felt like I could come to God exactly where I was at, unashamedly. Before that point, shame drove everything. I tried to change because I hated who I was. But after that moment, change began to come from a different place. It wasn't self-hatred anymore. It was hope. I hated the fact that I couldn't change, that I had tried and failed so many times. But here I was standing there, and hope sprang anew in my heart. I don't never have to go back to being that person ever again. And it doesn't depend upon my ability to be able to do it. It depends upon the grace of God and the love that he has for me. God stopped feeling like someone who was just always disappointed and ashamed of me, who I had to hide my face from. He became a place I could run to even when I failed. So instead of consigning myself to a future of going back to what I had always done, I embraced a future that I didn't know quite where it was going to lead, but I knew who was leading it. Listen, I stopped making dramatic promises about what I was going to do in the future. I began to ask God for help today, letting tomorrow worry about itself. What I began to realize is effort only wore me out. Trusting God began to change who I was. I didn't know 50 steps down the road. I didn't know what tomorrow looked like. I could barely tell you what was going to happen in the next 5 minutes. But I did this. I began to trust in the Lord with all my heart, and lean not unto my own understanding. I began to acknowledge Him in the ways that I was walking, whether I appeared to be victorious or whether I was stumbling and falling. I could come to Him. I could rely upon Him. I knew He wasn't disappointed in me. I knew He was there to help me and to give me strength to continue forward. And it's like when you drive down the road, how you can look in your rearview mirror and see where you have been. That's the way it was. I could see in my rearview mirror where I had been, but when you look out the front windshield, there's a brand new place that you're going to. It wasn't a redo of the past 39 years. It was something new, something exciting, and it brought me on a trip that has brought me to where I am today. Listen, freedom didn't come just because I began to believe that there could be a different future. Freedom came because I realized I didn't have to hide anymore, that I could come to God in all my mess and He would still accept me and love me. I'm not perfect, but I know this. I'm not who I was. At the point of this recording, it's been 13 and a half years. I haven't gone back. I have a life I would never have expected, that at points in my life I wouldn't even have dared to imagine that I could have. I didn't deserve this. I didn't work for this. I didn't earn this. It's a result of God's grace and His love. If He could do this for me, I guarantee you He can do it for you. So maybe you're out there. Maybe you're stuck in the cycle of trying and failing. Maybe you're stuck in the cycle where you have just stopped trying altogether and you have nothing left to give. And maybe you've just consigned yourself to the fact that this is the way it's always going to be. I want you to understand, there is no place where the love and the grace of God cannot find you, and He can change you, and He can give you that hope and set you free. So if you're still listening to this and you felt something inside of you stirring, that's important. Don't ignore it. Listen, you don't have to fix yourself. You don't have to get better before you come to Him. He'll meet you right where you are. So you might be asking, okay, James, so what do I do? Well, just be honest with God. And I would encourage you to ask this one question. Lord, will you meet me right where I'm at? And He will.